"Fat dude, last warning. It won't be just your car the next time." The Iron Fang MC felt strong because of that menace, which was etched on Sheriff Samuel Big Sam Hayes's Plymouth Fury. They had a fantastic mental picture of him. Just another Cedar Ridge, Montana, small-town cop who was overweight and had learned to ignore people. The type of man whose badge had little value against their expanding criminal empire and whose size made him an easy target. However, Hayes had learned a crucial lesson from his 20 years of destroying cartels on 3 continents. The most successful predators don't even have a predatory appearance. He has been playing this part flawlessly for 15 years. The modest sheriff. The kind giant who was no longer as sharp. All the while constructing a case so intricate that it would shake the FBI to its core. Now, Hayes couldn't help but smile as he documented each obscene symbol and danger in his photographs of their workmanship that morning. They had broken themselves in the process of trying to break him. The most advanced organized crime takedown in Montana history would begin with a single phone call, turning this sleepy hamlet into the epicenter of the operation. What federal agents had found years earlier was ready to be revealed to the Iron Fang MC. The most deadly wolves frequently disguise themselves as the fluffiest sheep. A brief silence before we go on. Please let us know where you are watching from. Make sure to hit subscribe if you're liking these stories, as tomorrow's episode is going to be incredible. As Hayes traced the gang's emblem with his worn fingers, the courthouse parking lot was covered in deep shadows from the rising sun. The sound of boots on asphalt behind him signaled the presence of Deputy Allison Harper. She was taking in the scene with her usual careful attention to detail, and he knew it without having to turn back. Harper's voice was tight with repressed anger as she stated that they hit 3 other places last night. The same approach was given to Old Man Thompson's pharmacy, the Ridge Diner, and Pete's petrol station. Broken windows, gang tags, and threats. Hayes nodded slowly while recording the vandalism from every angle with his camera. They are using traditional expansion strategies, such as claiming territory and displaying force. They aired, but he stopped, examining a specific marking close to the driver's door. Harper stepped forward, prepared with her notepad. What sort of error? Take a look at these symbols. Hayes indicated some markers. The style and location were not created by a staff of strangers. This was Barrett's enforcer, Crater himself. He marks his targets in a way that is unique. I have seen it previously. Previously? Harper's brows went up. When do you mean back? Yes, when I worked for the Bureau. Hayes's knees protested the action as he straightened. We nearly had them 15 years ago. Had a detailed plan for their entire operation. Money laundering, firearms, and drugs. However, someone alerted them. That raid claimed the lives of 3 good agents. Harper kept a close eye on her employer. She had never heard this anecdote in the 3 years she had worked with him. What took place? It was Axel Shadow Barrett. Disappeared in the confusion. Rebuilt his dominion to a greater extent than before. Now that he's here, he believes he's discovered a simple area to grow into. Hayes's eyes did not meet his smile. What he didn't comprehend, he always did minimize. The morning shift was starting inside the station. Just out of the academy, Deputy Brian Foster was entering the vandalism reports for the night into the incident board. Through the window of his office, Hayes observed the young deputy painstakingly recording every instance. Harper went over her notes and remarked, "They're sending a message, demonstrating to us that they can strike at any time and anywhere, including the sheriff's own car." "No," Hayes said, grunting as he sank into his chair. "They are demonstrating their strategy to us. The sequence is the same: territory marking, intimidation, and then the beginning of the protection rackets. The serious business comes next. Weapons, drugs, or whatever generates the most revenue in the region. How would you like this to be handled?" From his bottom drawer, Hayes took out an old file with a faded but still readable label. Iron Storm, a classified operation. Photographs, surveillance logs, and thorough maps that had been painstakingly preserved throughout the years were all contained there. Make a hospital call to Dr. Stevens. Inquire about any odd ER trips he may have had in the previous month. Overdosing, mysterious injuries, or anything else that could suggest their drug operation is already underway. Harper nodded and started to dial. Pulling up a secure email client he hadn't used in years, Hayes turned to his computer. He kept thinking about that botched raid while his fingers lingered over the keyboard. The screams, the shooting, and the faces of the agents who failed to escape. Sheriff? Foster popped up in the doorway, anxious. According to Mayor Preston's online version, it's urgent. Hayes whispered, I bet he does. In regards to motorcycle clubs in particular, the mayor had been advocating for a more lenient attitude to police enforcement. Hayes now knew why. Inform him that I'm out there looking into vandalism cases. He returned to his computer and began writing a message that he had been putting off for 15 years. I'm requesting that favor from richardsonjamesfb.gov. Subject, Bangkok. Harper came back with a somber expression. 6 overdoses using new synthetic substances that they have never seen before have been reported by Dr. Stevens in the last 2 weeks. Additionally, every victim was wearing Iron Fang MC apparel. Hayes clicked submit on his email and stated, they're testing the market. Before expanding the product's distribution, they test its performance with their own employees. What should we do next? Hayes grabbed his jacket and stood up. Take Foster and begin questioning last night's witnesses. I had to pull over. The reports of vandalism. Let's wait. I have to speak with someone first. At the door, he stopped. Harper, too. Nobody outside of this room should be trusted with the things we discussed. Without allies in high places, the Thunderlords would not have made it this far. Hayes observed how normal everything appeared as he drove through the peaceful streets of Cedar Ridge. Unaware that their small village was about to become the epicenter of a storm that had been building for 15 years, people went about their regular lives. An unidentified text message chimed on his phone. Fat man, you were warned. It's preferable to leave some things in the past. Hayes turned into the former industrial district and erased the message. He had earned his reputation long before he ever wore a sheriff's badge, and now was the moment to awaken some ghosts and remind some people of that. The Thunderlords MC believed that their vandalism was a message to him. They were unaware that they had just provided him with all he needed to destroy their entire planet. It had been years since there had been any real activity in the old warehouse sector on the outskirts of Cedar Ridge. Broken windows of abandoned buildings gazed aimlessly at overgrown parking lots like old sentinels. Hayes killed the engine of his patrol car by parking it behind a corroded shipping container. It was not a formal visit. Some things have to be kept secret. What had been an auto parts store was now Tom Hawkeye Shaw's surveillance equipment shop. The building was unmarked except for a faded for lease banner that had been there when Shaw purchased it 5 years prior. An ideal disguise for a former FBI surveillance specialist who would rather remain anonymous. I was wondering when you would arrive. Hayes came in and Shaw yelled. The elderly agent was still very skinny, still wore thick glasses, and was still surrounded by monitors that displayed feeds from cameras located throughout the town. Observed the damage done to your vehicle. Who did it, you see? Better. Shaw entered commands into his keyboard, displaying pristine video. Seen the entire affair from 3 distinct perspectives. Barrett is taking a personal interest because Crater performed the honors personally. Hayes took a seat in a chair with reinforcements. When Shaw found out his old friend was taking over as sheriff, he placed a special order for it. They're becoming more daring and moving more quickly than they should. Not only here. Shaw flipped between channels, displaying comparable images from nearby counties. They have been organizing their growth. Every town experiences the same intimidation, vandalism, and treatment. Then the defense rackets begin. That's only a cover, though. For what purpose? Perhaps your wife is more knowledgeable than I am. At the hospital, Maria has been seeing a lot of odd patients recently. Hayes's mouth clenched. In an effort to protect Maria, he had been keeping her out of this. Which kind of cases? Novel synthetic medication. Extremely addicting. Very hard to track down. People refer to it as thunder. Very subtle, isn't it? In 2 weeks, there have been 6 documented overdoses, but Maria believes there may be more. People who are too afraid to visit the hospital. Cedar Ridge is being used as a test market by Barrett. Hayes thought. Little population. Remote area. Controlling the variables is simple. Shaw gave a nod. He also has assistants. Been keeping an eye on some intriguing radio traffic. There is a backdoor in the new encryption system that the mayor insisted on implementing for official communications. Everything is copied to a server that I am unable to locate. Hayes's cell rang. Harper. We're having problems at Pete's petrol station, Sheriff. Just now, 3 members of the Thunderlords appeared and threatened. I'm on my way. Hayes got up. Tom, send me the film clips, and keep an eye on yourself. What if I discovered you? They may as well. I have some surprises set up here that would make our former FBI tech boys envious, so don't worry about me. 3 motorcycles shone in the dawn light at Pete's gas station. Hayes recognized them right away. With its chrome skulls and matte black finish, Storm's custom Harley is easily identifiable. Getting his hands dirty was not a reputation of the intelligence officer. This wasn't merely intimidation, it was an evaluation. Is everything all right here, Pete? Hayes got out of his patrol cruiser and called out. The station owner's face was white as he stood stiff behind his counter. Storm's leather vest creaked as he turned slowly. Sheriff, just a pleasant business conversation. Nothing that would worry the police. I'm worried about everything in my town. Hayes played up his size by moving purposefully heavy. Let them believe he was unruly and slow. Particularly when tourists pose a danger to nearby company owners. Dangers? Storm grinned icily. We're providing defense. These are perilous times. If something were to happen to Pete's lovely establishment, feel ashamed. Hayes took note of where Storm's friends were. Both are newcomers, most likely prospects who are keen to establish themselves. They kept reaching for concealed weapons with their hands. Amateurs. With a gentle tone, Hayes stated, this is what's going to happen. You'll be leaving. Right now. And you tell him something for me when Barrett inquires about this meeting. He moved closer, his voice trailing off. Send him greetings from Bangkok. The hue faded from Storm's visage. He gestured to his guys without saying another word. In a cloud of dust and panic, the motorcycles roared to life and carried their riders away. Pete, are you all right? Hayes's thoughts was already racing when he asked. Storm's response proved it. Bangkok, Barrett recalled. Recalled the price he had paid for it. Harper was waiting with fresh news back at the station. In response to our persecution of motorcycle clubs, Mayor Preston called once more and demanded a meeting. He probably is. Hayes looked at his watch. It's time to stop again. Continue recording everything. Harper, too. The mayor installed that encrypted radio system. Don't believe it. Hayes came to find St. Mary's Hospital quieter than normal. He discovered Maria looking over patient records in her office. As he walked in, she looked up, her face displaying a mixture of understanding and worry. She added softly, I was wondering when you'd come ask about the overdoses. How awful. Even worse than the official figures indicate. The substance they take. It's unlike anything I've ever seen. Extremely well made and sophisticated. Street-level manufacturing is not what this is. Hayes gave a somber nod. Legitimate companies are being used as fronts by them. Most likely have a lab set up nearby under the pretext of a chemical supply firm or pharmaceutical research center. Will. Only under extreme distress did Maria soften her tone and use his first name. What are you facing? Surely these aren't just motorbike thugs. Hayes stroked the picture on her desk, but no. 15 years ago, on their wedding day, he had just quit the FBI. Something far worse is out there. Additionally, they have assistance where it should be available to us. Once more, his phone buzzed. Richardson texted. I received your message. You underestimate how bad it is. We must meet. The old location. Midnight. After deleting the message and bidding his wife farewell, Hayes returned to his vehicle. Everything was coming together. On the backs of everyone he cared about, however, were targets. Cedar Ridge was not the only place where the Thunderlords MC had brought their activity. They had a conflict with them. Hayes now needed to move with caution. Because he wouldn't be destroyed by a single mistake. Everything and everyone he had vowed to defend would be destroyed. It took us a long time to prepare and tell this narrative. Please subscribe to our channel if you find it entertaining. It is really important to us. Let's return to the narrative. The old logging road became a tunnel of shadows at midnight. A quarter of a mile from the rendezvous, Hayes turned off his headlights and let his car to move forward on its own. Throughout his time with the FBI, the method had often saved his life. In Montana's wilderness, sound penetrates farther than light does. Agent James Richardson was waiting in the exact spot Hayes had anticipated. His FBI-issue SUV was hidden among bushes that hung low. Although his hair had become gray from 15 years, he still maintained the same intense focus in his eyes that had made him one of the greatest in the Bureau. As Hayes came closer, Richardson remarked, "You've got brass ones." Leaving out the Bangkok illusion in that way. All day long, Barrett's staff has been rushing around, making calls, and relocating assets. Excellent. Fearful individuals make blunders. Richardson produced a tablet, its screen jumbled by encryption software for any onlookers. This is something you must see. They're pushing that manufactured drug. The product isn't merely new. It's a formula from the government. For special forces, an experimental combat stimulant was created. The research was sold to the highest bidder. Hayes looked over the chemical analysis. That explains why Maria saw a high level of professional production quality. This isn't being prepared in a remote laboratory. 3 of their production plants are tucked away throughout the state. On paper, these pharmaceutical companies are legitimate, but they are all connected to unbreakable shell corporations. Richardson thumbed over the papers. This is where things become fascinating, though. You know who sits on each and every board? Preston, Mayor. Barrett has established an incredible network of protection, including judges, state representatives, and even a federal prosecutor. The Bangkok mission failed because of this. They had assistance from within. Hayes's face grew serious. The operatives who perished that evening were purposefully placed in a trap. Barrett was aware of our approach. Before our backup came, a cleanup crew was waiting to sanitize everything. 15 years of pent-up anger were reflected in Richardson's voice. These individuals are untouchable, but we have been constructing a case ever since. If you make one mistake, the proof will vanish. Witnesses retract their statements. Warrants are blocked by judges. In the gloom, a twig broke. With their hands reaching for weapons, both men froze. A deer ran across the street and vanished into the brush. Brett has become careless, Hayes said. Growing too quickly and aggressively. He is now creating an empire rather than only selling goods. Additionally, Cedar Ridge is thought to be his crown treasure. Ideal distribution center, local government authority, and no federal involvement. Richardson passed a thumb drive to him. You can see all we have here, but be careful. Some really dubious numbers have been receiving calls from your mayor. Permit him. Letting a snake believe it has you cornered is sometimes the best way to capture it. Unusual activity was reported by the night shift back in town in the industrial zone. Suspicious crowds at abandoned warehouses, numerous cars traveling without lights. As he passed, Hayes took notes on license plates and mentally mapped out patterns. His cell rang. Harper. We're having difficulties, Sheriff. Old man Thompson just had his pharmacy struck by Thunderlords. As opposed to the vandalism. They took all of his prescribed medications. He made an effort to stop them. Is he still alive? Seldom. He is now being worked on by Maria's crew, but that's not all. Something was left behind. His counter was engraved with a message. This is personal, but Bangkok wasn't. Hayes gripped the steering wheel more tightly. Head to the hospital. Keep a record of everything. Harper, keep an eye on Thompson at all times. Witnesses are often made to vanish by these individuals. There was a planned mayhem in the ER. Maria greeted Hayes at the door as he arrived. Her medical scrubs got blood on them. It was close, but he's steady. They professionally worked him over. Knew just how to hurt people without killing them. Between the drugs and the concussion, he said anything. He continued saying something about a warehouse, but he's hardly able to speak. Barrett claimed to have witnessed the entire event firsthand. A mysterious text message appeared on Hayes's phone. Fat man, you initiated this game. We're now following Bangkok's regulations. Will Maria's voice was low as she caressed his arm. What took place in Bangkok? What do you not tell me? Mayor Preston's voice roared throughout the hospital room before Hayes could respond. Let me say something, Sheriff Hayes. The sterile whites and blues of the hospital contrasted with the mayor's pricey outfit. And fake fury flushed his face. This is not acceptable. Company owners are contacting me regarding police harassment of law-abiding motorcycle riders. And now this incident, which is obviously just a straightforward robbery gone awry, is being exaggerated. A straightforward heist. Hayes's voice has the power to freeze hell. In his own business, George abandoned a 70-year-old guy who had been tortured. Robbery is not what that is. It's a message. Be careful, Hayes. Preston lowered his voice and moved closer. It's best to ignore some messages. You wouldn't want anything to happen to that devoted deputy or your beautiful wife. Hayes moved more quickly than his size would have indicated. He pinned Preston against the wall in a single, smooth stroke, his huge frame obstructing security cameras and endangering my people's view. That isn't particularly mayoral. You're doing something wrong, Preston exclaimed. You don't know what you're up against. No, you're the one who's going wrong. Hayes's tone was incredibly composed because, now that I'm positive you're working for them, everything is different. He fixed his uniform, let go of the mayor, and turned to leave. The final piece of the puzzle had just been confirmed by Preston's threats. Through Cedar Ridge, the Thunderlords were doing more than just transporting goods. They had enough dishonest officials in their pocket to carry out their plan to establish it as their headquarters. However, they had overlooked one important detail. Hayes hadn't played small-town sheriff for the past 15 years because he was afraid. He has been constructing a network and obtaining intelligence in anticipation of this exact occasion. Their biggest triumph, they believed, had been in Bangkok. He was going to prove to them that it had been their worst error. That night, his phone buzzed one more time. It was Shaw's message. You must see these new pros in town. The complexity of this is going to increase significantly. At 3 a.m, Shaw's surveillance business was bustling with activity. Movement through the streets of Cedar Ridge was monitored by several monitors, which displayed black SUVs with diplomatic plates traveling with military accuracy. Shaw pulled up personnel files and stated that they were former military contractors. CIA Wet Works experts, Delta Force veterans, and Blackwater veterans. This time, Barrett isn't taking any chances. Hayes watched the video. They are more than just hired muscle. Take a look at their hayisation and formation. These are teams for hunting. Across town, they have started erecting observation posts. Very professional. Electronic warfare capabilities, counter-surveillance, etc. Shaw focused his attention on one of the groups. Their boss is fascinating. Logan Vale, former division head for special events. The type of person governments use when they want issues to fade away without a trace. How many? So far, 3 4-man teams. Here's the strange bit, though. They're not only observing you. They are also keeping an eye on Mayor Preston. Hayes's brows went up. Barrett has little faith in his own resources. Fascinating. There's more. Shaw retrieved security footage from the hospital. They have been keeping an eye on the emergency room, recording all patients who arrive with symptoms of an overdose, and creating a database of some sort. Hayes recognized that they were utilizing Cedar Ridge as a human laboratory for their new medicine, and that they were following their test participants. His cell rang. Harper. We have a problem at Thompson's residence, Sheriff. Someone left you something after breaking in and looking over his medical data. When Hayes arrived at Thompson's residence, it was dark. At the door, Harper greeted him with a worried expression on her face. Professionals, they avoided the alert and left no evidence other than this. There was a manila envelope on Thompson's kitchen table. There was only one picture inside. 15 years ago, in Bangkok. The warehouse where everything had gone wrong was one Hayes knew. However, he had never observed anyone in the shadows observing the FBI raid from this perspective before. But that's not all, Harper muttered. It was Dr. Stevens who called. Tonight, there were 3 more overdose instances, all exhibiting the exact symptoms that Thompson had mentioned prior to his attack. Superhuman strength, increased anger, and complete painlessness. Hayes whispered, they're turning it into a weapon. Cedar Ridge serves as their trial ground for the drug, which is a combat enhancer and not merely for financial gain. A black SUV drove by the residence, its windows darkened so that its occupants could hardly be seen. Hayes pointed out the military-grade communications array and minor armor improvements on the vehicle. He informed Harper that they were no longer merely observing. They are gathering intelligence in anticipation of a major event. Return in silence to the station. Harper, 2. Use the back roads. Don't allow them to follow your schedule. Hayes arrived at St. Mary's Hospital when Maria and Dr. Stevens were going over security footage. She reported that someone had obtained our patient records. Used authentic credentials. The password for Mayor Preston's medical administrator. They're recording outcomes, Dr. Stevens continued. However, I have never witnessed anything like these overdose cases. The drug alters people in addition to making them feel high. Boosting aggressive instincts, strengthening muscles, and dulling pain receptors. Hayes said these were ideal traits for warriors. Or managing riots. Or worse. A text message from an unknown number appeared on his phone. A warning of professional civility. You have 24 hours to get out of town. It gets messy after that. The message was read over his shoulder by Maria. Vale. Most likely. He's providing us an opportunity to leave. More than Barrett would accept. Will you? Hayes grinned glumly. No, but I will make use of those 24 hours. Harper had been occupied back at the station. Accessed Preston's email by using the back door Shaw discovered. Take a look at this. Shell Business's regular payments. They are all connected to pharmaceutical research companies. The intriguing aspect, though. Every payment is associated with a particular hospital overdose case. Hayes recognized they were paying for test participants. Preston is assisting them in locating possible applicants. People in despair. Addicts. Anyone who is susceptible enough to be taken advantage of. On his desk, a surveillance shot surfaced. On the building across from the station, one of Vale's teams is putting up observation tools. They had given up trying to conceal. Harper noted that they were attempting to frighten us. No. Hayes looked at the picture. They are creating a starting point. Recording our trends. Routine tactical planning prior to a significant operation. Once more, his phone buzzed. Richardson. I just received word from higher up. Someone is attempting to evade your authority. The FBI is under pressure to take up all Cedar Ridge drug-related prosecutions. Hayes came to the conclusion that Barrett's Justice Department folks were attempting to legally sideline us before Vale's guys took over. Richardson informed him that you also have friends. That proof you've been collecting? Continue. Barrett is unaware of the scope of what we are creating. Another dark SUV rolled by the station outside. Observing it through his window, Hayes saw the barrel of a sniper rifle in the rear seat, just barely visible. The inhabitants of Vale were experts. They would give him a full 24 hours, no more. Put Shaw on the line, Harper. We must expedite our timeline. What are you contemplating? Hayes studied the dark shapes that had plagued him for 15 years as he took out the Bangkok photo. They believe they are pursuing us. It's time to let them experience what it's like to be the prey. The sky was blood crimson as the sun rose above Cedar Ridge. Any threat to Barrett's operation would be eliminated within 24 hours by Vale's teams. Hayes, however, knew something they didn't since he had spent 15 years preparing for this moment. The predator that appears to be prey can occasionally be the most deadly. For the last time, his phone buzzed. Sheriff, tick-tock. The clock is ticking away. The adage, calm before the storm, was inaccurate. Actual storms didn't make their presence known. Slowly and methodically, they increased the pressure until it was intolerable. Now, looking over Shaw's surveillance feeds and seeing Vale's teams take up positions surrounding Cedar Ridge, Hayes felt the pressure. Shaw acknowledged that they're skilled at using his network of cameras to monitor several black SUVs. Encrypted communications, changing positions, and expert counter-surveillance techniques. However, they committed a single error. Hayes concluded examining the patterns and said, they think we're amateurs, observing metropolitan areas in accordance with regular military procedures. If you know what to look for, it's predictable. Shaw's console flashing a red light. Hospital movement. Someone inside is being contacted by Vale's team. A familiar face appeared in the security feed. As he gave one of Vale's guys a big envelope, Dr. Robert Stevens appeared anxious. Hayes's mouth clenched. They believed Stevens had been on their side. Hayes said, get Harper on the line and track that envelope. Now we must move. Harper had already positioned herself in her unmarked automobile, watching the handoff. Targets on Mason Street going north. Hold on, the pharmaceutical storehouse is about to be pulled into. Hayes told them to stay on them. But keep your distance. They're not motorcyclists. If you get too closely, they will detect a tail. Officially, the warehouse had been deserted for months. Shaw's infrared imaging, however, revealed a different picture. High power consumption. Ventilation systems are operating at full capacity. There's a laboratory there. Hayes's cell rang. Maria. Will. A huge consignment of prescription antipsychotics was just ordered by Stevens. The same ones that appear in the toxicology findings of the overdose victim. Hayes understood that they were no longer merely testing the medicine. Full-scale production is about to begin. Vale was behind the wheel of a black SUV that rolled past the station. For a moment, their gazes locked. Professionalism amongst predators. It was an obvious message. There was not much time left. What's the envelope displaying, Harper? Results of the test, she said. Blood tests, chemical substances, and psychological assessments. They do more than just produce medications. They are producing a certain product. Something under their authority. Hayes's thoughts whirled through the possible outcomes. The antipsychotics. The augmentation of hostility. The repression of suffering. They are constructing an army. There was fresh action on Shaw's monitors. Thunderlords advancing with vigor. 20 bicycles made their way to the warehouse area. Hayes mentioned that Barrett was coming to check his investment. It's time to add some variables to their formula. Are you in position, Harper? All set. If they adhere to protocol, surveillance is set up just as you mentioned. They will. Although they are excellent, Vale's folks are predictable. Military reasoning. Identify trends. Continue your routines. Take command of the battlefield. Let's demonstrate to them how citizens alter the rules. Hayes took his time moving his pieces. A police checkpoint there, a traffic accident here. Just regular small-town law enforcement, nothing out of the ordinary. However, every action moved Vale's teams out of their ideal positions and had them adjust. They're reacting, Shaw said. Modifying their coverage patterns precisely as you anticipated. With Vale's teams and Barrett's bikers navigating a game they were unaware they were playing, the warehouse neighborhood had turned into a chessboard. Harper's strategically positioned cameras recorded every action, and Hayes watched via surveillance feeds. The package is in play, she said. Stephen's packet had arrived at its destination. A safe space within the warehouse. Harper had placed a tracking device during the handoff, so now they had eyes inside. Barrett showed up with Iron Fang motorcycles blasting through the streets, as he always does. Hayes, however, made an intriguing observation. The bikers and Vale's professionals are at odds. Two distinct predator species are compelled to coexist on the same hunting area. Will. His secure line carried Maria's voice. Stevens recently gained access to Bangkok-related restricted files. He has a clear goal in mind. Hayes said, let him look. Identifying the type of cheese a rat is after can often be the best method of catching it. The formation of Vale's troops had changed, but they still had observation points. There are gaps in their coverage. Hayes had studied such patterns for decades, but amateur onlookers would not notice. He informed Harper that they were getting ready for action. The 24-hour notice wasn't merely polite. They had a window for preparation. Leave the area. Give them the impression that we are blind. Vale's message chimed on his phone. Sheriff, one last warning. Astute individuals are aware of when to leave. Hayes returned the simple reply with a smile. You ought to have done more homework about Bangkok. The intended effect of the message was achieved. The first indications of uncertainty appeared in Vale's squad's ordered routines as they abruptly changed positions. They had anticipated hunting a sheriff from a tiny town. Rather, they were beginning to suspect that they were the target of the quest. Shaw reported movement at the warehouse. They have a large item to move. Lots of cars and strict security. Hayes told them to let them. Before you can show the opponent how badly they've lost, you may need to give them the impression that they've triumphed. Harper's surveillance gear was partially hidden by the lengthy shadows created by the sun's descent over Cedar Ridge. Hayes's trap was steadily closing in those shadows. Not with force or conflict, but with knowledge. Vale has professional teams. Barrett's motorcycle riders were lawbreakers. Hayes, however, had spent 15 years getting to know this community inside and out. Maria's voice was urgent, Will. Stevens discovered what he was seeking. Project Thunder, perhaps. Military records. Protocol testing. This surpasses Barrett. Hayes said, "I know," as he watched many parts come together. That is the aspect of Bangkok that they have never comprehended. The goal was not to apprehend criminals. The goal was to reveal something more significant. That night, his phone came on one last time. "Richardson. I have your proof. They are preparing warrants. However, Hayes. Take caution. There are more professionals playing besides Vale." There was no need for the warning. The additional monitoring squads were already visible to Hayes. Government license plates. Federal tactical equipment. The game was growing and attracting more experienced players. However, that was precisely what he had been anticipating. He called across the secure line, "Harper. Start the second phase. Let's demonstrate to them why the most hazardous hunting grounds are small communities." The second phase began with a murmur. Not very impressive. Hayes observed through Shaw's surveillance system as his meticulously fabricated information started to spread across Cedar Ridge's criminal underground. The enforcers of the Thunderlord were growing uneasy and doubting Vale's presence. Barrett's command of his own operation was beginning to be questioned by Vale's experts. Harper reported from her observation station near the warehouse that they are tearing apart. Vale's guys and two of Barrett's lieutenants just got into a heated argument. Something about the merchandise being missing. Hayes saw the tension rise as he nodded. "The package we planted, what about it?" Dr. Stevens fell for the ruse. "The files pertaining to the true aim of Project Thunder are among those he is now accessing." Stevens was seen feverishly copying files in his office on the hospital surveillance cameras. As he perused records that exposed the actual nature of what he had contributed to creating, his hands began to shake. Stevens's voice shuddered over the security camera video, "My God. They are producing more than simply soldiers. They are producing weaponry. They can use chemical triggers to control human weapons." Hayes's cell rang. "Maria. We have a problem, Will. Vale's representatives just showed up at my emergency room and demanded to see the overdose victims. Federal documents are in their possession." Hayes told them to stop. "There will be assistance." The assistance was already underway. Richardson had set up FBI units all around the medical facility. Disguised like ordinary employees. Vale's personnel would have to deal with federal agents rather than hospital security if they pressed too hard. Shaw reported movement at the warehouse. An urgent meeting was recently convened by Barrett. All chapter headings must be fully colored. Hayes watched the Thunderlords assemble through well-concealed cameras. Even in the blurry video, the tension was evident. There are boundaries separating Barrett's more professional aspects from traditional bikers. One of the leaders of the chapter was saying, "You promised us territory. Rather, military contractors are scuttling up our asses and the product is disappearing." Outside noise interrupted Barrett's remark. The warehouse was encircled by Vale's teams. They are surrounded by black SUVs. The plan did not include this. "What is Vale up to?" Over the secure line, Harper inquired. Hayes responded, making his move. "Barrett is becoming unmanageable. The goal of Vale's employers is to eliminate the intermediary." The ensuing conflict was unavoidable. Driven by pride and rage, Barrett's bikers clashed with Vale's experts. Harper's cameras were recording everything, but neither side saw them. Recording the rifts in their partnership. "Sheriff." Panic was audible in Stevens' voice. "I have a meeting to attend. Right now." "What did I discover?" "This extends as far as Washington." The creation of augmented soldiers was not the only goal of Project Thunder. Making controlled ones was the goal. The medication. They become vulnerable to chemical cues as a result. They have the ability to turn violent reactions on and off as they like. In what location are the triggers kept? That's it. Here in Cedar Ridge, they are concealed in shipments of genuine pharmaceuticals. There's more, though. The operation in Bangkok. Drugs weren't the only issue. Early iterations of the chemical were being tested. The deaths of those operatives were not the result of a botched raid. They served as test subjects. Hayes's heart froze. Arrive to the station. Bring everything you discovered. Stevens, however, did not make it. His car was driven off the road by a black SUV halfway there. Vale himself left, disregarding his professional demeanor. Were you sure we wouldn't be observing? Vale walked up to Stevens's wrecked automobile and asked. That your sudden interest in confidential files would go unnoticed. Hayes knew it would be too late, but he was already taking action. With military efficiency, Vale's crew eliminated Stevens and any evidence he was carrying. There wouldn't be anything there when the police got there. Maria's voice was more urgent now. Will the victims of overdose? They're all responding in the same way. Heightened hostility and synchronized actions. They seem to be getting triggered. They are, Hayes said somberly. Barrett is becoming unmanageable. As a result, Vale's employers are moving their experiment forward. Here in Cedar Ridge, they are building their own army. A message from Barrett himself appeared on his phone. We must speak. They just tried to kill me, Vale's people. It appears that we now share an adversary. He's not trustworthy, Harper said. Hayes reassured her, I don't. The enemy of my enemy, however, can be helpful at times. Vale's squads were moving into new locations throughout the town, as Shaw's monitors revealed. They had stopped concealing their military identity by setting up checkpoints and carrying weapons in plain sight. Shaw noted that they were preparing to contain the town. Normal military procedure for civil disturbances. No, Hayes clarified, seeing trends. They're getting ready for a protest. They wish to demonstrate to their employers the capabilities of their chemical soldiers. Their testing ground is Cedar Ridge. For the last time, his phone buzzed. I just heard from above, Richardson. Do whatever you're planned quickly. There are orders coming down to place the entire town under quarantine. They will fabricate a chemical spill to hide whatever Vale's people are planning. Looking out over his town, Hayes saw Barrett's dominion fall apart as Vale's armies grew more powerful. The truth about Project Thunder, about Bangkok, about everything. Everything was building to a climax. He called across the secure line, Harper. Do you recall the backup plan we talked about? The one that looked too dangerous. The option of nuclear? It's time, really. Let's demonstrate why conducting military operations in a civilian town is not a good idea. Sometimes a badge or a gun aren't the best weapon. That's the reality. Violence was not the goal of the nuclear option. Information was at issue. Vale's teams had been keeping an eye on Hayes's department, but they had overlooked the civilian network he had established over the course of 15 years. Teachers, postal workers, and store owners. Individuals who lived in a tiny town and were aware of everything. According to Shaw, who was keeping an eye on communications throughout Cedar Ridge, it's beginning. Teams from Vale are unable to move without being noticed. Every patrol, every checkpoint. They are being followed by our people. As his strategy came to fruition, Hayes kept an eye on the feeds. The professional soldiers of Vale encountered a situation for which they were unprepared by their military training. A town functioning as a single, well-coordinated intelligence network. Harper said they had already lost 3 observation posts. Trucks are unintentionally parked by civilians to obstruct sight lines. Suddenly, construction workers must operate close to their monitoring locations. Half of the sections they dominated an hour ago are now blind. Hayes's cell rang. Barrett wants to meet. Hayes agreed against all protocol. Sometimes the person with federal credentials is not always as good as the devil you know. Thompson's pharmacy, which remained closed during the attack, served as the meeting place. Barrett arrived by himself, his customary haughtiness replaced with something Hayes hadn't anticipated. Fear. Without introducing himself, Barrett stated, "Vale's people tried to kill me. My own lieutenants are changing their minds. Territory is no longer the issue here. Everyone who is aware of Project Thunder will be killed. Why should I know? Because that was not how Bangkok was supposed to happen." Barrett produced an ancient document. They weren't intended to die, those agents. It was only intended to be an early compound test. However, something went wrong. They had no control over the chemical stimuli. Hayes had a crackling radio. "Maria. Will, new signs are emerging in the overdose victims. They are coordinating their patterns of conduct. They seem to be getting orders." Barrett acknowledged that they are listening to the message. The water supply contains the triggers. Little doses that accumulate over several weeks. The people of Vale are producing more than simply super troops. They are building a controllable hive mind. Why Cedar Ridge? Own, independent water system. Ideal environment for testing. It's not only here, though. Similar enterprises have been established in municipalities all around the nation. Sleeper cells are being constructed. Individuals who are unaware of their weapons until they are triggered. Harper's voice interrupted. "There's activity in the warehouse, Sheriff. Something is being loaded onto trucks. They appear to be chemical containers. The main causes," Barrett clarified. "Everyone who has been exposed joins their network after those are incorporated into the primary water supply." An army appeared out of nowhere. Hayes examined Barrett's face for signs of dishonesty. "Why switch them on now?" "Due to the fact that I have witnessed the last step. The test subjects in Bangkok did not simply pass away. They turned on one another and ripped each other to pieces. Vale's people believe they have power over it, yet they are unable to do so. No one can." Vale's troops could be seen rallying and moving with a fresh sense of urgency on Shaw's monitors. "They are aware of a problem," Shaw wrote. "They are switching to emergency protocols in their communications." Hayes's phone came to life. "We have an issue, Richardson. Just now, orders were issued to impose complete quarantine. They will shut down Cedar Ridge entirely. No one is in or out." Maria's voice was a controlled fear. "Will. The most recent blood tests at the hospital. Each sample is displaying the chemical markers. In addition to their test subjects, they have been injecting the entire town." Barrett gave a somber nod. "The third phase. Everyone who has been exposed joins their controlled population as soon as they set off the primary trigger. Chemical conditioning provides instant obedience. Unless we stop them," Hayes continued, his thoughts whirling with potential outcomes. "No one can control it," you said. "Show it. Give me all of your Project Thunder resources. Every test result, every file. They will murder me. In either case, they will kill you. How many innocent people you take with you is the only question." Their radios were interrupted by Vale's voice. Their frequency had been cracked by him. "Well done, Sheriff. Undermining our operations and turning the town against us. However, you have an hour before we put the last stage into action. Get rid of your folks or face the consequences." Hayes pressed a button on his phone in response. The same message appeared instantly on all Cedar Ridge screens, including phones, computers, and televisions. Project Thunder was made public. Barrett's files, 15 years worth of intelligence, everything coming to light. Hayes said, "Vale, you can't keep the truth to yourself. No more. You don't realize what you just did," Vale said. However, there was a change in his tone. Uncertainty. Hayes saw his information bomb explode on government channels, news sites, and social media. Vale's group was suddenly in the open. They continued their clandestine work into the day. "Will," Maria said. "The CDC is on the line. They want to see the outcomes of our tests. The NSA, FBI, and CIA are all phoning." Barrett's regard for Hayes had grown. "You had this planned from the beginning. Everything. The monitoring. The network of civilians. Everything. You weren't merely constructing a case." Hayes concluded, "I was assembling an army of witnesses. Because sunshine is the one thing that Black Ops cannot withstand." For the last time, his phone buzzed. "Richardson. Orders are evolving. A task force is being put together. Whatever you've begun. It's larger than we all anticipated." Vale's team scrambled as their mission went awry, and Hayes watched over his community. He told Barrett that this was never about apprehending criminals. The goal was to reveal the truth. Gangs and cartels aren't always responsible for the most serious crimes. Those with clearances and badges are the ones who commit them. The actual darkness was just starting to dissipate, although the sun was already sinking over Cedar Ridge. There was still Vale's army of chemicals waiting to be activated. The battle was far from done, but the truth was out. When the initial wave of activation started, St. Mary's Hospital was in disarray. After being exposed to the components of Project Thunder, patients suddenly moved with frightful synchronization, their eyes empty but their movements accurate. Through security cameras, Maria watched as her own employees were transformed into Vale's puppets, and she barricaded the drugstore. She informed Hayes that they are aerosolizing the trigger ingredient by using the hospital's ventilation system. "We are activating everyone who has been exposed to the base medication." Despite the turmoil, Hayes's voice stayed calm. "How many?" "In the hospital alone, at least 30. Like Vale's squads, Will, they are not only aggressive but also well organized, moving like soldiers, guarding exits, and setting up control points." Harper saw similar scenarios play out across town. With Vale's soldiers using military precision to guide waves of activated people, the warehouse district has turned into a staging area. Harper stated that in order to secure the perimeter as they get ready for the major event, they are establishing a buffer zone with controlled civilians. Hayes looked at Shaw's CCTV footage, identifying trends in the mayhem. Not only are they displaying the weapon, but they are also enforcing martial law and utilizing our own citizens as their enforcers. Over the radio, Barrett's voice cracked. His most devoted lieutenants joined Hayes after he broke away from his group. "They're moving the main trigger. The water treatment plant is the destination of the armored convoy. When that reaches the primary supply," Hayes concluded, "everyone exposed becomes their puppet. For what length of time? Maybe 20 minutes. This time, Vale isn't taking any chances." Numerous calls from several agencies flooded Hayes's phone. Homeland Security, the CDC, and the FBI all want control of the situation. He did, however, see what they did not. Federal intervention was part of the plan for Vale's operation. They had not prepared for a small-town sheriff with a tactical commander's mindset. "What is required to create a counteragent, Maria?" As she watched more hospital employees come under chemical influence, she retorted, "We don't have time. The complex of the drug is made to attach to particular brain receptors. However, there may be an alternative. The triggers need to be dosed precisely." "Too much." Barrett interrupted, overloading the system. This is what took place in Bangkok. If the activation signal is too powerful, the chemical degrades. Hayes's thoughts whirled with possibilities. "How's the town's emergency broadcast system doing, Shaw?" "Still within our authority. Vale's population neglected the outdated analog infrastructure in favor of digital communications." "Go to the water plant, Harper. Don't participate, just watch. What exactly we're dealing with is something I need to know. The treatment center's surroundings resembled a battlefield. In order to prepare to introduce the major trigger, Vale's men had set up a perimeter employing controlled citizens as human shields. Harper mentioned that there were 4 chemical tanks. Strict security. But there's a problem. Vale's employees are fully outfitted with hazardous gear. They fear being discovered. Hayes understood that they couldn't risk being controlled themselves. The weapon isn't as accurate as it was advertised. Barrett, the members of your group that turned were triggered, not merely bought. Barrett snarled, sons of bitches. Putting our own citizens to the test. Maria's voice was more urgent now. The stimulated subjects are beginning to decline, Will. Loss of fine motor control, increased aggression, Vale needs to act quickly before his puppet army disintegrates. Hayes made up his mind. Connect me to the emergency broadcast system, Shaw. Maximum power at all frequencies. What are you contemplating? Use fire to put out fire. Their chemical was created to function with particular neuronal frequencies. When we overwhelm certain frequencies, we'll see what occurs. Barrett was the first to realize. The signal for an emergency alarm. It uses the same frequency that they use to activate it. Hayes affirmed, we create our own trigger if we boost it high enough. One that, rather than activating the chemical, will break it down. Maria said it might kill them. Vale uses the entire town as his own army if we don't try. Sometimes the remedy must be painful. Their plans was interrupted by Vale's voice. Sheriff, that's amazing. However, did you honestly believe that we wouldn't have defenses? Just now, your broadcast system fell down. Hayes grinned glumly. Verify once more. Hayes's civilian network had been carrying out his actual plan while Vale's forces had been guarding the water facility. All of Cedar Ridge's security and fire systems, automobile alarms, and other devices that may provide the proper frequency are programmed to go off at the same time. Now, Shaw. As hundreds of signals merged into a single, enormous pulse, the air itself appeared to quiver. The controlled subjects tripped at the hospital. They are losing their coordination. Vale's human weapons started to malfunction. Maria reported that it's functioning. The compound is disintegrating. However, the adverse consequences. Take care of the medical, Hayes said. We'll take care of Vale. Vale, however, had one final card to play. His crews began their backup plan as his chemical army fell apart. The water treatment plant was shaken by explosions. They would deny anyone else the opportunity if they were unable to regulate the population. Status, Harper. Through the confusion, she claimed that they were destroying everything. Including their own proof. Vale is destroying everything. Hayes observed the collapse of Vale's meticulously planned scheme via surveillance feeds. However, something didn't feel right. Vale was too polished for a mere retreat to burned ground. Shaw, check the water supply at the hospital. Why? The trigger chemical is being destroyed. No, Hayes suddenly knew clearly. While carrying out the actual strategy, they are hiding their tracks. Their main objective was never the water plant. Vale left him a final message, and his phone buzzed. Sheriff, good job. However, did you truly believe that Project Thunder was just focused on producing soldiers? The best weapon is sometimes the one your adversary doesn't anticipate. Hayes felt the implications as if they were a physical blow. They had overlooked the subtle threat because they had been so preoccupied with thwarting the obvious one. Not all of the evidence was being destroyed by Vale's soldiers. They were making sure that what was already happening could not be stopped. For Cedar Ridge, the real battle was only getting started. As Hayes reviewed the hospital's architectural drawings, the reality hit him like freezing water. The attack on the water treatment plant wasn't merely a distraction. It was disguised. Vale's personnel had been methodically altering the hospital's infrastructure while they had been concentrating on avoiding mass activation. Hayes declared over the secure line that they are not attempting to exert control over anyone. Their goal is to alter them irrevocably. Their actual laboratory has always been the hospital. Maria's voice was heavy with terrible comprehension. Last month, they demanded the installation of new water pipes and ventilation systems. The infrastructure of the building has a delivery system integrated into it. Every staff member, patient, and guest has been receiving microdoses. However, why? Observing Vale's troops withdraw from the water facility, Harper posed the question. If an army isn't being formed? Barrett's stern chuckle broke the silence. Considering that soldiers are only there for a short time, but altering people's fundamental brain chemistry, that won't change. That was the main purpose of Bangkok. Creating something worse rather than weaponry. Populations that are compliant. Shaw's analysis produced data that illuminated Hayes's phone. The new systems at the hospital were more than just delivery systems. They were very advanced chemical processors that gradually changed everyone's brain patterns. Hayes understood that they were playing a longer game. The subjects that were triggered. The apparent military uses. It was all a front for the actual experiment. They are not attempting to use force to subjugate others. Their goal is to eliminate the need for control. Maria's voice trembled a little. Will. Long-term exposure patients' blood testing. They are experiencing a fundamental change in their brain processes. Heightened suggestibility. Less opposition to power. Decreased capacity for autonomous thought. Soldiers are not being produced. They're making. Barrett said, sheep. An entire community full of completely compliant people who are unaware that they are being manipulated. No opposition. Not a revolt. Simply, conformity. Harper's voice pierced their astonishment. There's movement at the hospital, Sheriff. Despite their departure, Vale's teams are leaving something behind. It appears that automatic distribution systems are in place. Hayes remarked bitterly, they don't have to stay. They will be assisted by the infrastructure. Each individual who enters those doors receives an additional dosage. The town's character gradually shifts over the course of several months, and no one seems to notice. However, why Cedar Ridge? Shaw inquired. Why begin here? Because little towns get unnoticed, Hayes said. Ideal environment for testing. If this works, Barrett concluded, they can use it anywhere: offices, schools, and hospitals. Central water and air systems can be found anywhere. They're not attempting to use force to manage the populace. Their goal is to make control seem effortless. Maria's voice was more urgent now. It's worse than that, Will. The modifications. They are inherited. The substance modifies the expression of genes. This generation is not the only one they are altering. Every succeeding generation is being altered by them. Through surveillance feeds, Hayes observed Vale's forces carrying out their withdrawal. They weren't sprinting. They were only moving on to the next stage. Already in position, their weapons started quietly destroying the town's infrastructure. How can we prevent it? Harper inquired. No, we don't, Hayes said. Not right away. The systems are tamper-proof by design. A huge dose is released by fail-safes when you attempt to shut them down. We would murder every patient in the hospital. What's the play, then? Hayes's thoughts whirled with possibilities. This was just what Vale's team had planned, utilizing the overt threat to conceal the covert one. However, they had committed one error. Hayes was thought to be a small-town sheriff posing as a federal agent. How long before the genetic alterations become irreversible, Maria? 48 hours based on these readings. There's no turning back after that. Get me all the information you can about the new facilities at the hospital, Shaw. Work orders, supply chains, and contractors. Find out the origins of those automated systems, Harper. Barrett. Yes. It's time to contact your former contacts. Each and every one. The people of Vale are more than just crooks. They are a component of a larger whole. We must ascertain the true identity of Project Thunder's sponsor. Richardson's message chimed on his phone. I just received word from the upper floor. This is more than any of us anticipated. Keep an eye on yourself. The success of this experiment is desired by several extremely powerful people. Hayes gazed over his town, aware that its residents were gradually changing with each minute that went by. Vale had arrived at Cedar Ridge with more than a weapon. The future had come with him. A future without the need for force to maintain authority. Where people's DNA physically included obedience. Will. Maria spoke softly. What if we are unable to halt this? Hayes said, we stop it, in a firm, confident voice. Because Cedar Ridge is only the beginning if we don't. This will be implemented everywhere. Establishing a society in which they may engineer away the genetic flaw of independence. One last light came on his phone. Not Vale's voice, but Vale's number. Someone at the top of the chain. Well done, Sheriff. However, did you honestly believe that we would carry out such a strategy without backup plans? Remain calm, or otherwise Bangkok will appear to be a training exercise. Hayes's answer was straightforward. You need to have done more research on me. Sheriffs in small towns are accustomed to being undervalued. We are dangerous because of this. The battle for Cedar Ridge had recently evolved into a conflict over the future of humanity. Hayes had to win it in 48 hours. There were 47 hours left before Cedar Ridge's metamorphosis was irrevocable. Hayes stood in the maintenance tunnels of the hospital, looking over the new equipment that Vale's people had put in place. Simple yet elegant, the delivery systems were made to appear like standard improvements while gradually altering each exposed person's genetic fate. Maria said, I found something, her voice resonating across the concrete hallways. The substance targets particular genes linked to autonomous thought, creativity, and defiance of authority in addition to altering brain circuits. Literally, they are incorporating compliance into DNA. Hayes pointed out the advanced filtering mechanism of a recently installed pipe. What is the number of individuals exposed? At least 60% of the town, according to hospital records. Initially, there are just small personality changes and a slight increase in suggestibility due to the genetic abnormalities. It wouldn't be noticed until it was too late. Harper watched Vale retreat as his radio crackled. Sheriff, they're establishing observation posts outside of town as if they're waiting for something, rather than simply retreating. We're awaiting confirmation, Barrett interrupted. I just got a call from some old acquaintances. Project Thunder is about selection, not just control. In order to find genetic resistors, they are building a baseline population that is compliant. What about resistors? Shaw inquired over the telephone. According to the data, 10% of any population are inherently immune to the chemical. The actual objectives are them. Hayes concluded, once they determine who is uncontrollable, they eliminate them, eliminating anyone with the ability to resist in order to create a society that is completely submissive. Maria's voice was filled with restrained rage. These delivery methods, are seen in hospitals all around the nation. They have been creating this network for years with all those federal funds for modernization and infrastructure upgrade schemes. An unlisted number chimed on Hayes's phone. The second voice was that of a person accustomed to being obeyed. You did a great job figuring out our distribution system, Sheriff, but you must realize that we've reached a point where no small-town cop can make a significant difference. Who am I talking to? Someone who recognizes your potential. You've shown more ingenuity than anticipated. Someone with your strategic thinking would be very helpful to us. You are obviously one of the resistors, after all. Someone who is inherently resistant to chemical compliance. People like you have a place in the new order. Hayes laughed icily. Taking your sheep to death. Guiding the next stage of human progress. Sheriff, give it some thought. No more disorder, no more crime, no more resistance. Through genetic engineering, perfect social order can be achieved. Doesn't that justify a few compromises? Like those Bangkok agents? Testing is regrettable but necessary. Since then, the chemical has undergone tremendous refinement. The procedure is now far more compassionate. Hayes noticed a disturbance above. He could see hospital guards moving with strange coordination through the grating maintenance tunnels. More puppets are being turned on. The voice went on, your time is running out. Soon, the genetic alterations will be irreversible. Embrace the unavoidable. Come help us create a better world. Hayes hung up the phone, his thoughts whirling with possibilities. One thing they were correct about. They were out of time. However, they had committed the same error as Vale. Underestimating the potential of a tiny town when overburdened. What is required to create a counteragent, Maria? It would take weeks, even if I had the means. The genetic alterations are too intricate. Not to undo them, Hayes explained. To defend against them. Something to protect people's innate defenses. Barrett was the first to realize. The innate immunity of the resistors must originate from some source. We could recreate some genetic element. That's right. Not everyone needs to be cured. All we have to do is keep enough individuals safe to preserve free choice in the populace. There was new urgency in Harper's voice. Movement at all hospital entrances, Sheriff. The return of Vale's people is imminent. Complete tactical equipment. Shaw cautioned that they must have overheard us discussing a counteragent. Communications at the hospital were hampered. No, Hayes said. We're not going to be stopped by them. To list the resistors, they are present. Before putting the last stage into action, gather up anyone exhibiting natural immunity. They observed Vale's crews using surveillance cameras to go through the hospital with military accuracy, verifying patients against a database of some sort. Special treatment was being applied to anyone exhibiting resistance. Maria's voice trembled a little, Will. Children are being taken. Anyone exhibiting genetic indicators of possible immunity. Hayes made a snap decision. Go to the pediatric ward, Harper. Make use of the tunnels for maintenance. Barrett. At the main entrance, create a distraction. Cut off the hospital's electricity, Shaw. Everything, excluding emergency systems. What is the play about? Harper, already on the move, inquired. Are they trying to find resistors? Let's provide them with an other source of concern. Do you recall the frequency that interfered with their first control chemical, Maria? Yes, however the formula has since been changed. It won't function the same. It is not need to. All we need is chaos. Enough confusion for those children to leave while we carry out the actual plan. There was real interest in Barrett's voice. What is it? About 10% of any population has innate immunity, according to what you said. That isn't arbitrary. It is evolutionary. The secret to stopping this lies somewhere in their genetic code. We don't have to resist the shift. The existing opposition needs to be strengthened. Maria understood. The verified resistors' blood samples. If we were able to identify the genetic components of immunity and incorporate them into the delivery system of the institution. Hayes came to a close. Barrett praised the idea of weaponizing immunity rather than compliance. Genetics against genetics. Their preparations were interrupted by a fresh voice. Broadcasting on all frequencies was Vale himself. Sheriff, you're really smart. However, did you really believe that we wouldn't have prepared for this particular situation? Examine the emergency power systems of your hospital. As Hayes looked over the infrastructure diagrams, his blood froze. Not only did the emergency generators supply electricity, the delivery system included them. Additionally, they had merely provided a justification for Vale's people to activate them. Hayes ordered a complete evacuation. Everyone is out. Right now. However, it was too late. They buzzed to life, the emergency systems, bringing an upgraded version of the chemical into the hospital. Creating compliance was not the only goal of Vale's endgame. The goal was to permanently eradicate resistance. Will. Maria sounded desperate in her voice. The young patients in the pediatric unit. Their innate immunity is at its peak. If they are lost. We don't, Hayes said emphatically. Status, Harper. Nearly to pediatrics. Sheriff, however. Something else is involved. There is anything in these tunnels for maintenance. It appears to be a backup system. Hayes took another look at the blueprints. Realizing what he had previously missed. The infrastructure of the hospital was more than merely a means of delivery. It served as a backup plan. If they were unable to manage the populace, they would ensure that no one would ever be able to resist. Get the blood samples, Maria. Keep the distraction going, Barrett. Find out as much as you can about those emergency systems for me, Shaw. It's not over yet. For the last time, his phone buzzed. Richardson. I just received word from the upper floor. Do whatever you're planned quickly. There are orders coming down to place the entire town under quarantine. No one is allowed to leave. Not until all of the genetic changes are finished. Hayes glanced at the grating in the maintenance tunnels. Observing Vale's group methodically list and eliminate anyone exhibiting resistance. They believed they were building the ideal society. Rather, they were going to discover why evolution preferred flexibility over mastery. Harper. He dialed the secure number. You discovered those backup systems. What are your thoughts on some imaginative demolition? Sometimes a poison's own antidote was the only way to stop it. Hayes had recently discovered their delivery method. As the evacuation got underway, chaos broke out at St. Mary's Hospital. Vale's squads maneuvered with military accuracy. Anyone exhibiting genetic resistance should be isolated and extracted. However, they had committed a critical error. They had forgotten that hospitals are governed by more than just rules. They are powered by people. The West Corridor is shut. Harper reported from the tunnels used for maintenance. But these contingency plans, they are not limited to emergency situations. They serve as a backup delivery system, totally independent of the primary infrastructure. Hayes looked over the schematics Shaw had sent. Are the controls accessible? Better. They can be reprogrammed by me. They are made to run automatically. This implies that they are changeable. But before they figure out what we're doing, we'll only have one chance. The tactical conversation was broken by Maria's voice. Blood samples from verified resistors were obtained. Immunity is not solely a hereditary element. It is epigenetic. Not all of the alterations are being resisted by their bodies. They are vigorously retaliating. When will the important elements be isolated? With this apparatus, we don't have any hours. Unless. She hesitated. A concept is emerging. The compound is not the only thing being distributed by the delivery system. It's working on it. Increasing its efficacy. If we could go back and undo it. They isolate the resistance factors using their own system. Hayes came to a close. However, we would require access to their central processing unit. The comm crackled with Barrett's voice. I believe I've located it. Sublevel 3. Behind what appears to be ordinary water treatment machinery. Strict security. It is being personally protected by Vale's inhabitants. Hayes observed Vale's team methodically guarding the facility via security feeds. They were doing more than just taking out resistors. They were getting ready for something more significant. "Sheriff," Shaw said. "Get strange readings from their avenues of connection. Reinforcements are being called in. Not limited to tactical groups. They appear to be scientific units." Hayes's thoughts were racing with possible outcomes. They have no intention of stopping us. They are examining the answer. Everything that is taking place. The evacuation. The mayhem. All of this is a component of their data acquisition. His cell rang. The same unidentified number as previously. "Excellent, Sheriff. You're starting to realize how big Project Thunder really is. Cedar Ridge was never the only factor in this. Your town is just the most recent in a long line of closely watched trials. How many more? Enough to make the procedure flawless. Genetic alterations. The elements of resistance. Even the patterns of social response. All meticulously recorded. I find your strategic opposition to be really intriguing. Demonstrates potential ways to optimize operations in the future." Harper was rewiring the backup systems in the pediatric ward. Despite the pressure, her hands remained firm. Nearing completion. "Sheriff, however. These controls. They're not limited to the area. They have a network. What are they doing in this place? Other facilities are connected to it. Everything is interconnected." Barrett affirmed. He spoke in a sad tone. "My last government contact just got back to me. Controlling a single town is not the goal of Project Thunder. The goal is to systematically regulate the population on a national level. This is only the last test run at Cedar Ridge." Their darkest worries were validated by Maria's analysis. The genetic alterations are not arbitrary. They are intended to be inherited, bringing about long-lasting modifications to human growth. They're changing more than just our town. Their goal is to change the course of human evolution. Hayes observed the arrival of Vale's research teams via cameras. Installing monitoring apparatus with inadequate practice. They had given up attempting to conceal. They were recording everything. In the most elaborate experiment in history, Cedar Ridge's people was treated like lab rats. "Will." Maria's voice was more urgent now. "These samples of blood. Not all of the changes are being resisted by the kids who have inherent immunity. We have never seen antibodies produced by their bodies previously. Their DNA appears to be actively resisting artificial alteration. Is it possible to duplicate it? Not necessary. Everything we need is already in their blood. However, distributing it over the hospital." Hayes made the decision to turn their own network against them. "Those backup systems, Harper. Is it possible to turn the flow around?" "On it already. But there's no turning back once we do this, Sheriff. The entire system will be overloaded." Their transmission was interrupted by Vale's voice. "Sheriff, I wouldn't do that. These backup systems serve as more than just delivery systems. They serve as safeguards. Set them off in the wrong way, and a deadly dose is given to the entire hospital. Is your hypothesis of natural immunity truly worth risking everyone's lives for?" Hayes immediately patched Maria onto the security feed in response. "Show him." Maria's microscopic footage showed the truth Vale's people had overlooked on screens positioned across the hospital. Blood samples from the kids revealed more than just immunity. They demonstrated evolution in action. Human DNA is constantly changing, establishing organic shields against man-made manipulation. Watching cellular structures reorganize themselves, Vale mumbled, "It's impossible. The changes were intended to be long-lasting. According to Hayes, life finds a way. You've never understood that. Since resistance isn't solely hereditary, obedience cannot be incorporated into DNA. It is a basic aspect of human nature. There was an air of amazement in Barrett's voice. You must see this, Sheriff. Are the adults displaying immunity? They have the same genetic markers as the kids. It goes beyond simple resistance. Generation after generation is adapting to it. Natural selection, Maria said. Humanity has already begun to build defenses against your goal. We're not merely opposing your changes. We're progressing past them. Hayes followed the frantic efforts of Vale's research team to record this unanticipated event via security feeds. A fact they had not expected was emerging from their meticulously regulated experiment. Natural resistance grew greater the more they attempted to manipulate human genetics. Harper, how are the backup systems doing? They're fail-safes, but ready. Hayes reassured her it wouldn't matter. Since we have no intention of destroying their distribution mechanism, we will use it to deliver something unexpected to them. The inherent defense of humanity against genetic engineering. One last light came on his phone. Richardson. Do whatever you're going to do quickly. I just received word from the upper floor. Total containment is what they're doing. Until the experiment is finished, no one is allowed in or out of Cedar Ridge. Hayes scanned the security feeds from the hospital. Observing Vale's people record what they believed to be their victory. However, they had overlooked an important aspect of evolution. The smallest populations tend to have the strongest adaptations. From living things that have reached their limits. Is everyone prepared? Hayes inquired. They might all die knowing what they were going to try. But occasionally taking unachievable risks was necessary to survive. One by one, the answers returned. All set. Hands solid on the backup controls, Harper. All set. Blood samples are ready, Maria. All set. Barrett, offering protection. All set. Shaw, keeping an eye on everything. Hayes inhaled deeply. The outcome of the next few minutes would affect not just Cedar Ridge's destiny but also the future of humanity. Let's then demonstrate why a tiny town is not a good place to conduct experiments. Harper. Right now. The backup systems came alive with a hum. Not with Vale's meticulously designed compounds, though. Rather, they started dispersing something stronger. The inherent resistance of humanity to artificial domination. The struggle for Cedar Ridge's genetic destiny had just turned into a struggle for the evolution of humanity. And it was only getting started. The impact was nearly instantaneous. People at St. Mary's Hospital started to recover from the induced artificial compliance caused by Vale's chemicals. It was more than just opposition. It was a restoration. Human DNA reaffirming its resistance to synthetic modification. Maria reported that it's functioning. Keeping an eye on patient readings. The ventilation system is allowing the natural immune components to spread. Increased resistance to the genetic alterations is being displayed by everyone exposed. The scientific team at Vale hurried to record this surprising discovery. Their meticulously regulated experiments are going beyond their bounds. Hayes saw their professional poise crumble on security feeds. While examining cellular data, one scientist mumbled, "It's impossible. The changes were intended to be long-lasting. Nothing odd should be able to undo them." Over their channel, Hayes said, "Life adapts. You've never understood that. Since resistance isn't solely hereditary, compliance cannot be engineered into DNA. It's necessary to survive." Vale reacted violently and instantly. With deadly determination, his tactical squads started to move through the hospital. No longer concerned with keeping shelter. He gave the order to destroy the distribution system. Lethal force is permitted. Harper called from the maintenance tunnels, "Not happening." All controls were redirected. They are unable to stop it without setting off their own fail-safes. There was bitter enjoyment in Barrett's voice. My contacts have just confirmed. Similar events are taking place in other Project Thunder locations. This is not the only place where the immunity factor is spreading. It's being recorded. Researched. You are being harmed by your own scientific network. Hayes followed Vale's teams as they attempted to contain the issue via the hospital's security network. However, more people were eluding artificial control with every minute that went by, demonstrating that human adaptation is stronger than engineered conformity. Maria's voice was more urgent now. Will. These texts. Immunity does more than only keep individuals safe. They are becoming resistive to changes in the future as a result. Similar to a genetic vaccine that guards against man-made tampering. Hayes's cell rang. Richardson. I just received word from the upper floor. The Oversight Committee for Project Thunder is in disarray. Half of them want to stop everything. Half of them want to escalate. When a population develops natural immunity, no one knows what to do. Shaw, who was keeping an eye on communications, said they were losing control. Not only here. Everywhere. Similar resistance patterns are being reported by other test sites. It seems as though the threat is finally being recognized by the human immune system. They're tactical. Channel was interrupted by Vale's voice. The appearance of professional distance has vanished. You don't know what you did. Control isn't the only issue here. It's a matter of survival. Human nature must be changed. Uncontrolled. Chaos is the result of free will. Destruction. No. Hayes cut him off. It causes adaptability. To evolution. Something that would never be replicated in your controlled experiments. They observed Vale's scientific staff frantically attempting to restrain what they had unleashed via security feeds. The truth, however, was getting out quicker than they could stop it. Through their own research network as well as Cedar Ridge's hospital. Sheriff Harper said. They are implementing a countermeasure of some sort. We were unaware of emergency protocols. While observing Vale's personnel install new equipment, Hayes looked at Shaw's monitors. The natural immunity is being overridden. Use brute force to push their changes. Analyzing cell phone data, Maria reassured them that it wouldn't work. Their chemicals are already seen as dangerous by the human body. The best of natural selection. Our safeguards against artificial control are physically evolving. Barrett's tone was foreboding. There's activity outside. Military formations. Not only the teams of Vale. There's a frightened person upstairs. As government troops started to encircle Cedar Ridge, Hayes observed via outside cameras. However, their deployment was different in some way. They weren't merely keeping the town under control. Vale's people were also being contained by them. Hayes said to Vale, your own superiors are turning against you. What you cannot see, they can. Genetic control will not be accepted by humanity. We will continue to adjust. Continue to change. Continue to resist. We do it. In response, Vale gave the command for his remaining squads to gather in the main distribution center of the hospital. They would destroy the proof of their failure if they were unable to manage the populace. Hayes chose not this time. Harper put Phase 2 into action. Emergency systems started to activate throughout the hospital using documented proof of Project Thunder's failure rather than Vale's compounds. Evidence of humanity's innate resistance to genetic alteration started to be broadcast on every screen, computer, and piece of medical equipment. Maria said, observing biological structures reconfigure themselves, it's not just spreading through the air. Direct touch is how the immunity is spread. Resistance is practically being shared by people. As years of meticulous research came to an end, Vale's scientific teams watched in despair. Instead, their efforts to engineer compliance had set off the most fundamental survival instinct in human nature. Adjustment. Vale made one final attempt, but you don't get it. Humanity will destroy itself if it is not controlled or altered. We must progress past free will. We're changing, Hayes said. Not quite how you had hoped. Diversity, adaptability, and resistance to control are all favored by natural selection. You made an attempt to manufacture humanity's spirit. Rather, you strengthened it. They watched through security cams as Vale's remaining forces had to make a decision. Either keep fighting for a failed experiment or acknowledge that humanity has evolved on its own. Harper called out from the maintenance tunnels, "Sheriff. They're regressing. Each and every one. The scientific teams themselves are quitting their jobs." As Hayes examined Shaw's monitors, he observed the meticulously built control structure of Project Thunder crumble. However, there was something off about Vale's withdrawal. Too well planned. Too methodical. "Maria, how is the spread of immunity going?" "Spreading more quickly than anticipated. In addition to being resistant, everybody exposed is also actively making antibodies. Humanity's immune system seems to have been anticipating this." His cell rang. "Once more, Richardson. We've got an issue, Hayes. I simply intercepted commands from a higher-up. They are no longer attempting to control the immunity. They're attempting to turn it into a weapon." Hayes felt the implications as if they were a physical blow. Vale did not retire in surrender. It was repositioning tactically. They could attempt to harness humanity's innate resistance to control for something even more heinous, but they couldn't stop it. Hayes ordered everyone to pay close attention. What's going on here? The adaptability, the innate immunity. Cedar Ridge is no longer the only topic. They will attempt to militarize the very process of human evolution. The only people who know enough to stop them are us. He saw people assisting one another, sharing immunity, and naturally defying artificial control through the hospital's cameras. Vale had attempted to genetically modify humanity to be more compliant. Rather, he had set off something much more potent. The inherent resistance to authority in the human soul. The struggle for Cedar Ridge's genetic future had turned into a struggle for the evolutionary fate of humanity. It wasn't even close to being over. As military units around St. Mary's Hospital reached their breaking point, the command structure started to disintegrate. As soldiers observed citizens, including children, actively defending one another from containment procedures, years of training and discipline clashed with fundamental human decency. Harper, using surveillance to detect movement, reported that 3 additional troops just stood down. The dispersal mechanism was supposed to be deployed by the NBC crews. They're not merely disobeying commands. They are aggressively breaking down their own apparatus. Hayes watched as skilled warriors made the most difficult decision of their lives while studying the security feeds. Since they are able to see what Vale's superiors cannot. Weapons cannot combat human nature. They saw Vale's own scientific team come to a similar crisis point through locked laboratory windows. Dr. Sarah Collins, the principal investigator, at last expressed what many had been considering. This is no longer science. Humanity is not being protected by us. Without permission, we're attempting to remake it. The immunity factors, Maria interrupted, looking at fresh information. They are not dispersing at random. They are focusing on particular genetic indicators that Vale's team created to ensure compliance. It seems as though human DNA identified the danger and created an exact defense. There was a grim enjoyment in Barrett's voice. Similar to Bangkok. Human nature turned against them when they attempted to make perfect soldiers and instead produced perfect resistors. When Vale's surviving devoted troops tried to take control of the hospital's main laboratory, they encountered unanticipated opposition, not from guns or bloodshed, but from their own citizens. Medical personnel selecting patients above protocols, security teams safeguarding test subjects, and scientists refusing to carry out further tests. "I've isolated something in the children's blood work," Maria said. The immunity does more than only combat Veil's substances. The way human DNA reacts to artificial modification is being irreversibly changed. As if our genome is becoming immune to efforts to regulate it. Hayes's cell rang. Richardson. The preliminary data was just sent to the Joint Chiefs. This is more than a single wild experiment. Facilities for Project Thunder are located all around the nation and are integrated into vital infrastructure, including schools, hospitals, and water treatment facilities. Under the guise of legitimate modernizing initiatives. Hayes came to a close. For what duration has this been occurring? Years. The first significant test was in Bangkok, but at Cedar Ridge, something changed. The reluctance that comes naturally. It goes beyond simply terminating their program. It's being revealed. They observed the ongoing disintegration of Veil's meticulously built command structure via security feeds. More scientists declining to take part in human experiments, more military opting to defend rather than contain. Additional proof of Project Thunder's actual extent is emerging. Sheriff Harper made an important call. Veil has access to a secure system of some sort. It appears to be a fail-safe procedure. As Hayes looked over the hospital's infrastructure diagrams, his blood ran cold. He is no longer attempting to control the situation. He's attempting to hide it. Similar to Bangkok. Shaw, tell me everything you know regarding the demolition of that structure. On it already. Shaw answered. The fall of the warehouse was not an accident. They took advantage of the building's own systems. Something to do with the maintenance tunnel's pressure differentials. Here, they altered the same tunnels. Hayes understood. Get out there, Harper. Right now. Harper, however, responded with grim resolve. No time. He must be prevented from activating those systems by someone. And I'm in my place already. Their tactical channel was interrupted by Veil's voice. Do you believe that making Project Thunder public will make a difference? Control is necessary for humanity. We ruin ourselves without it. Bangkok demonstrated that. The opposite was true in Bangkok. Barrett retorted. It demonstrated that it is impossible to design away human nature. You had to bury it for that reason. Not to conceal your defeat. But to conceal your accomplishments. To conceal the fact that our capacity for resistance to authority is what makes us the strongest species. They observed through surveillance as Veil's surviving supporters started carrying out the last containment procedures. However, something was going on in the main laboratory of the hospital. Not only were Dr. Collins and her group defying orders. They were working hard to reveal the real nature of Project Thunder. Collins aired on all frequencies using the info we have gathered. It demonstrates everything. Human experimentation without authorization. The invasion of the infrastructure. The endeavor to include human DNA conformity. We will no longer participate in this. As the truth spread, violence erupted on military command frequencies. American civilians were literally developing to defend one another from government control, and unit leaders were given impossible instructions to keep them in check. Maria's voice carried the exhilaration of a breakthrough, Will. The immunity of the children. It goes beyond simply avoiding genetic alterations. Human DNA is being trained to detect and reject any kind of artificial tampering. As if it were a genetic immunization against control. Through cameras, Hayes observed how human decision-making caused Veil's weapon development program to fail. Truth is prioritized over commands by scientists. Soldiers opting for safety above command. Freedom is preferred by humanity above manufactured obedience. Hayes said, Veil, it's over. Humanity is being prioritized over power by your own people. The only thing to wonder is if you'll choose the same course of action. In response, Veil started the fail-safe procedure. However, an unforeseen event occurred when emergency systems started to cycle up. Under Barrett's leadership, the the Thunderlords MC had set up shop in the hospital's maintenance tunnels. To protect, not to combat. Barrett said, "You're not burying this truth. Not now. The world must know what you attempted to do here and how you were thwarted by the fundamental character of people." A last message from Richardson flashed across Hayes's phone. Complete disclosure was just given to the Joint Chiefs. Orders are being sent down to safeguard every Project Thunder facility across the country. This is no longer containment. It's publicity. Hayes witnessed the triumph of spontaneous human adaptation against decades of manufactured control through the hospital's security network. Vale had attempted to use force to reshape humanity. Rather, he had demonstrated why it was impossible and improper to regulate human nature. Hayes ordered everyone to pay close attention. The future of humanity as well as Cedar Ridge depends on what transpires over the course of the next few minutes. Vale is going to discover why a hospital with devoted medical personnel and protective parents shouldn't be threatened. The strongest opposition isn't always retaliation. They're standing together. The struggle for genetic independence for humans was coming to a head. And whether Project Thunder left behind a legacy of control or emancipation would be decided in the following few minutes. St. Mary's Hospital was filled with emergency sirens when Vale's fail-safe procedures kicked in. Under artificially generated pressure, load-bearing supports deep within the maintenance tunnels started to creak. He planned to conceal his failure and all those who saw it, just like he had in Bangkok. Shaw noted that structural integrity was degraded on sub-level 2 while keeping an eye on engineering readouts. He is creating specific collapse points by utilizing the hospital's own systems. Perhaps 5 minutes remain before a catastrophic breakdown. Through security feeds, Hayes observed Vale's last move. However, there was a difference from Bangkok. People weren't fleeing in fear this time. Their organization was surprisingly effective. Harper reported from her station in the tunnels that the patients are migrating. Not merely fleeing. They are assisting one another, planning routes, and safeguarding those who are most in need. They seem to have an innate sense of what must be done. Maria's voice came from the lab with intensity. It's evolved immunity, Will. Fighting genetic alteration is no longer the only issue. It's improving people's innate hastative reactions. The collective adaptability gets stronger the more pressure Vale puts on it. They observed this adaptation in action through surveillance. Patients and hospital employees collaborating with near-superhuman coordination. Even Vale's own scientists, who had betrayed him, were assimilating into the evacuation process with ease. Vale broadcast on all frequencies, "You can't stop this. The systems in the building are locked. All traces of Project Thunder will be lost, even if everyone is saved inside. This everything vanishes, just like Bangkok." Hayes said, wrong on both counts, as he saw Barrett's Thunderlords MC take his place. First, everything has already been transmitted. The entire infrastructure network, your study, and your unapproved experiments. Everything is now public. Second, you forgot about Bangkok, Barrett continued. It has to do with structural engineering and small unit tactics. Hayes's cell rang. "Richardson. I just received confirmation. Across the country, federal attack teams are targeting Project Thunder installations. Instead of burying information, the Joint Chiefs want it made public. Hayes, though. Backup is on the way for Vale. Qualified contractors. Most likely the same Bangkok ones. They witnessed military-grade vehicles converge on the hospital via surveillance cams. The insurance policy of Vale. Cleanup operations focused private military contractors. However, they encountered unanticipated resistance. Harper said military units are interacting with the contractors. Not only those who took a stand. Each and every one. They've decided to keep the facility safe." There was tremendous enthusiasm in Maria's voice. "Will, the children's blood contains immune components. They are no longer merely stable. They can be replicated. We are able to create a long-lasting protection against genetic engineering. The entire program of Vale is rendered impossible. So this must go away, Vale growled over their channel. Do you believe that making Project Thunder public makes a difference? Another program will always be available. One more effort to manipulate human nature. It is unavoidable. No, Hayes shot back. Seeing more people opt out of compliance in favor of opposition. Human nature itself is unavoidable. It fights back more fiercely the more you attempt to control it. They observed Vale's contractors encountering strong opposition via cameras. From local police enforcement as well as military units. Barrett's motorcycle riders. Even volunteers from the general public. Cedar Ridge decided to take a united stance. Shaw cautioned that structural supports were weakening on sublevel 3. You need to leave those tunnels, Harper. Despite the danger, she said in a firm voice, can't. The primary control junction must be reached. The collapse sequence can only be stopped in this way. Hayes's thoughts were racing across the hospital's layout. The former wing's maintenance shaft, which was blocked off during restorations. Could it get to the intersection? Barrett understood right away whether someone could break through the sealed parts. Those obstacles can be overcome by my guys. Sometime, Harper, bye. The tone of Vale's speech was icy professionalism. No Project Thunder facility can ever be shut down, even if the collapse is prevented. Too much of the program is ingrained in vital infrastructure. Control is necessary for humanity. No, Hayes said. Observing how, in spite of the increasing danger, individuals at the hospital keep helping one another. Choice is necessary for humanity. Something about evolution you've never understood. Freedom, not control, is the source of the strongest adaptations. They witnessed an incredible scene through security feeds. Thunderlord motorcycle riders assisting military formations. Local police and hospital professionals are working together. Scientists that were involved in the creation of Project Thunder are now trying to reveal it. In the face of attempts at control, human nature asserts itself. Will, Maria said. The immunity is no longer merely spreading. Human genetic memory is starting to incorporate it. As if our DNA were learning to identify and reject man-made tampering. Vale's program wasn't a complete failure. It set off the next phase of human evolution. Richardson's messages flooded Hayes's phone. Facilities for Project Thunder were being exposed and met with opposition nationwide. The more they attempted to keep things under control, the more people decided to oppose it. Shaw warned of a major structural failure in 5 minutes. What's going on with the control junction, Harper? Nearly there. Barrett's group is breaking past the last obstacle. But Vale is coming this way, Sheriff. He isn't going to let this go easily. Through cameras, Hayes observed Vale's military-like maneuvers through the maintenance tunnels. However, there was a shift in his manner. Desperate resolve took the place of the professional composure. You're still not getting it, Vale broadcast. Control isn't the only aspect of Project Thunder. It's a matter of survival. Unchecked human nature breeds chaos and devastation. No. Hayes interrupted him. It gives you a choice. To adjust. To all that we are currently witnessing. People deciding to support one another. To unite. To oppose authority by uniting rather than using force. They observed the hospital's ongoing amazing metamorphosis through surveillance. There was more opposition to every attempt at control. Every danger draws people nearer to one another. Human nature is outperforming any engineered conformance. Shaw updated, 3 minutes to structural failure. Harper has arrived at the intersection, but Vale is nearly at her location. At the boundary, those contractors are pushing once more. Hayes made up his mind. Get your folks straight, Barrett. Maria, Please ensure the safety of the immune samples. Send everything, Shaw. Every piece of proof. Every piece of information. Show the world what they attempted to accomplish here. How about you? Though she already knew the answer, Maria inquired. Vale needs to be reminded of Bangkok's failure. Why the project was doomed. From the beginning. Why human nature cannot be engineered away. The fate of the hospital and the future of human freedom would be decided in the following few minutes. Vale was going to discover why evolution preferred choice over authority. Hayes went down into the maintenance tunnels, where steam hissed through burst pipes. Everything was in blood-red shadows due to emergency lighting, and the structural supports moaned under mounting strain. He heard Vale's footsteps coming toward Harper's spot at the major intersection. Shaw reported failing communications 2 minutes before critical failure. Harper gained access to the control systems, but 3 separate manual authorizations are needed for the override sequence. Hayes observed the above scene through damaged security feeds. Maria was in charge of the final evacuation groups as military personnel interacted with Vale's contractors. Barrett's Thunderlords established defensive lines and used surprising discipline to defend civilians. They're pushing again, Barrett said, his voice almost drowned out by engine noise. These are no longer typical contractors. These are the same Bangkok-based cleaners. Teams of experts in wet work. Hayes cautiously navigated the steam-filled hallways, recalling tunnels of a similar nature from 15 years prior. The insurance policy of Vale. The same people that cleaned up the evidence the last time. Maria's voice was urgent, Will. The samples of immunity are safe, but there's more. The blood work of the kids who've shown the most resistance reveals evidence of additional adaptation, such as their DNA continuing to change and the development of new defenses. Because evolution never stops, Hayes said, recognizing the shadow of Vale in front of him. Logan, something you've never understood. Natural selection is beyond your control. The only options available to you are to work with it or against it. The tunnels resonated with Vale's chuckle. Hayes, you're still thinking tiny. Still stuck in that constrained perspective. The goal of Project Thunder is not to manipulate evolution. The key is to guide it. Ensuring that humankind progresses in the right direction. Who says it's proper? Hayes stepped forward to challenge. Bangkok was buried by the same people. For decades, who has been covertly altering infrastructure. Using human DNA to play God without permission. Hayes could hear Harper working on the junction controls through his headset. The hospital as a whole would collapse if each manual override was not accurate. Similar to Bangkok, but with warning this time. It was time for them to put an end to it. Shaw updated at 1 minute and 30 seconds. Failure of structural integrity on several levels. Status, Harper. With her fingers flying over the controls, she announced that the first override was complete. However, the system is retaliating. We were unaware of the redundancies that Vale had placed in. The fight for the hospital grew fiercer above ground. In addition to military opposition, Vale's cleanup crews encountered concerted citizen protest. The collective decision of Cedar Ridge's people proved to be more resilient than any planned obedience. Through the steam, Vale yelled, "You still don't see it. When human nature is allowed to run amok, anarchy results." Bangkok demonstrated that. Those agents did not grow more orderly when they were immune to control. They became erratic. Risky. No, Hayes shot back, recalling what Barrett had disclosed. Instead of obeying orders, they adopted a defensive stance and began protecting people. That's what frightened you the most. Choice, not anarchy. Compassion is being chosen over control. Shaw warned, 60 seconds. Vale is nearly on Harper's position, but Harper has the second override. The cleanup crews are putting in one last push around the perimeter. Hayes observed through the last working camera as military soldiers and Barrett's Thunderlords held their ground. Former rivals banding together and doing everything in their power to safeguard the hospital. Human nature demonstrates its genuine power by unification rather than coercion. "Will," Maria said. "These new patterns of adaptation are no longer merely defensive. Other cells are being taught how to withstand manipulation by the actively spreading immunity. It's similar to witnessing the rapid acceleration of evolution." When Hayes finally saw Vale through the steam, he said, "Because that's what life does. It adjusts. It triumphs. It consistently chooses freedom over control." Harper completed the last override while Vale stood at the junction entryway, rifle trained on her. The fracture in his professional manner revealed the desperation underneath. "You don't know what you did. There is more to the program than control. It's a matter of survival. About making sure that mankind evolves in the proper manner." Hayes stepped into view and stated, "There is no right way. We learn that from evolution. Life follows its own course. It always has. Will always." 30 seconds, Shaw said. "Reaching critical stress levels is supported by structural elements." Harper. With fingers that never stopped, she answered, "Almost there. The last override sequence was started. But the system is locked, Sheriff. To finish it, someone must maintain manual touch." Hayes got it right away. The identical decision he had to make 15 years prior, just like in Bangkok. "Harper, get out of here. I'll keep it." Even as Vale's weapon aimed on her, she responded, "Not happening." Choosing to stand together can sometimes mean just that. Maria's voice carried breakthrough excitement above ground. The immunity factors are will. They are no longer merely spreading. Human adaptation to Hayesation is what they're preaching. The collective reaction is stronger the more pressure is applied. They watched Cedar Ridge stand together through malfunctioning cameras. Not only against the cleanup crews from Vale, but against the concept of controlled evolution itself. People making the decision to support, defend, and fight together. Shaw reported 10 seconds. Imminent structural breakdown. Vale's finger gripped the trigger more tightly. "Hayes, this is your last opportunity. Leave. Allow nature to follow its planned path." As Harper finished the last scene, Hayes retorted, "Nature is taking its course. Not quite how you had hoped. Because you overlooked an important aspect of evolution." "What is that?" "Control is not the source of the strongest adaptations. They are the result of decision. From a group of people standing together. From people deciding on their own course." Vale's weapon discharged as the override finished. However, an unforeseen event occurred. Something that validated all of Hayes's observations about human nature. Regarding choice. About uniting. Violence and guns were not going to win the battle for the destiny of humanity. The exact thing that Project Thunder had attempted to design away will be used to win it. The inherent resistance to authority in the human soul. The shot reverberated through the tunnels used for maintenance. However, Vale had overlooked one important element. The ability of human nature to make sacrifices. Barrett had moved more quickly than anyone had anticipated. The bullet intended for Harper was taken. Hayes's tackle behind him drove Vale flying into the intersection controls. Harper declared the override complete. Over the backup systems, fingers flying. The cycle of structural collapse came to an end. However, these readings. Something is going on in the main laboratory. They witnessed an incredible scene through damaged security feeds. In addition to military personnel, Cedar Ridge residents surrounded Vale's cleanup crews. The collective action of ordinary people is more powerful than any technological control. Maria reported the immunity samples immediately. They are reproducing in addition to being steady. As Vale's compounds were designed to, they spread via the hospital's ventilation system. Their own delivery technique is working against them due to natural adaptation. Hayes held Vale in place while Barrett continued to apply pressure to the junction controls in spite of his wound. Logan, you never got it. Human nature cannot be engineered. The only options available to you are to work with it or against it. Shaw stated via cleared communications that several federal units were arriving. FBI, CDC, and military supervision. They are no longer there to contain. Their purpose is to record. With blood dripping from a wound on his forehead, Vale laughed. Do you still believe that revealing Project Thunder makes a difference? There is already infrastructure in place. Decades of preparation and change. Hayes concluded, you built your entire program on a false assumption, so it is useless. You believed that human nature was against you and should be subdued. It's what defeated you instead. They saw the situation above change through security cams. When they encountered strong pushback, Vale's cleanup crews started to disband. Not only from greater numbers, but also from the indisputable proof that people are inherently resistant to authority. Maria's voice carried the exhilaration of a breakthrough, Will. These fresh measurements of cells. The immunity is no longer merely spreading. It's instructive. Each exposed individual develops the ability to generate their own resistance elements. It's similar to witnessing the rapid evolution of natural selection. Barrett forced a gloomy smile while applying pressure to his wound. Similar to Bangkok. Those agents did not just resist control after they obtained immunity. They began imparting resistance skills to others. Vale's folks had to bury everything because of this. According to Shaw, structural integrity is stabilizing. However, there is mobility at the higher levels. It appears that some of Vale's supporters are attempting to obliterate the proof. Harper answered, too late. Data transmission via backup channels. Everything is already available to the public. The whole infrastructural network of Project Thunder. Every one of their studies. All unapproved experiments. All of it is being televised across the country. Through CCTV, Hayes observed the hospital being secured by federal units. However, there was a difference from Bangkok. There would be no cover-up this time. No hidden evidence. The truth cannot be denied. A different course had been taken by human nature. As he was brought away by military police, Vale argued, you don't understand what you've done. Human evolution becomes unpredictable in the absence of direction and control. Risky. No, Hayes clarified, assisting Barrett in getting medical help. It becomes instinctive. In all your engineering, you forgot something. Freedom, not control, is the source of the strongest adaptations. They witnessed the breakdown of Vale's meticulously planned program via the hospital systems. Not only in Cedar Ridge, but all around the nation. Each and every facility. Each infrastructure was altered. Every effort to design compliance. Every one of them was exposed to public scrutiny. Richardson stated over Hayes's phone that federal strike squads are advancing on Project Thunder facilities around the country. However, an intriguing development is taking place. Not alone is the resistance growing in Cedar Ridge. People are choosing to unite wherever they attempt to impose control. There was confirmation in Maria's voice. The components of immunity. They are no longer merely biological. People are being taught to identify and oppose control. Similar to how people are becoming immune to manipulation. The hospital's perimeter had been protected by the Thunderlord's MC in association with military personnel. Harper had not only been spared her life because Barrett had decided to take a bullet to protect her. It had validated all Hayes had stated about the redeeming power of human nature. Harper from the junction controls yelled out to Will. These readings from the system. Vale did not merely attempt to destroy the hospital. He attempted to set off comparable procedures at other establishments. However, something is taking place. Hayes observed the shutdown of Project Thunder's infrastructure via security feeds. From within, not from an outside force. Truth is prioritized over commands by scientists. Unauthorized experiments are revealed by officials. Everywhere, people are choose to defy authority. As federal authorities readied him for transportation, Hayes informed Vale that it was finished. It's everywhere, not just here. You attempted to modify human DNA to be more compliant. Rather, you set off humanity's innate opposition to authority. Vale maintained that you still failed to see the wider picture. Control was only one aspect of Project Thunder. It was a matter of survival. About making sure humankind progresses in the right direction. Hayes interrupted him. It has to do with dread. Fear of the nature of people. Of free will. Of all the things that define our humanity. However, you overlooked one important aspect of evolution. The best qualities aren't created. They are selected. They saw Cedar Ridge residents aiding one another in their recuperation via the hospital's cameras. Former adversaries hastening. The protection of strangers by strangers. Humanity demonstrating its actual nature via free will rather than coercion. Joint Chiefs seek your advice on how to handle other Project Thunder sites, Sheriff Richardson stated. It appears that your strategy of allowing individuals to choose resistance over control is working better than any containment measures. Hayes saw Barrett's medical treatment. The ex-outlaw motorcyclist who had put sacrifice ahead of survival. Saw Harper gather proof that would reveal decades of unapproved experiments. Maria documented how humans have evolved naturally to resist artificial control. Hayes said, let people make their own decisions. Vale never grasped that aspect of evolution. Control is not the source of the strongest adaptations. Freedom is the source of them. From standing in unison. From deciding to be human. When Vale was arrested 3 weeks later, St. Mary's Hospital was buzzing with new life. The tunnels used for maintenance had been restored. Unauthorized alterations were removed from the infrastructure. And the passageways that used to be used to control patients were now open to them. However, a more significant transformation had occurred. The essence of the location. The manner in which individuals protected one another. Harper said final inspection teams are wrapping completion. Observing the final proof of Project Thunder's attempted manipulation being recorded by government authorities. The CDC attests that every delivery system has been neutralized. However, the immunity elements continue to spread. Hayes went over Maria's lab's most recent results. Vale's program had been defeated by natural resistance, but it had not gotten any weaker. It had grown stronger, integrated into the communal DNA of the hospital. By choice, not by coercion or manipulation. Nationwide, 17 additional Project Thunder facilities were made public. Through Hayes's encrypted line, Richardson provided an update. However, an intriguing development is taking place. The resistance is no longer merely biological. Similar to what Cedar Ridge achieved, communities are choose to unite. They observed Barrett oversee the Thunderlords MC's new community protection program via hospital security feeds, which have now been put back to their proper uses. The ex-outlaws had discovered a more worthwhile goal. Supporting the preservation of the very society that they had threatened. Shaw, keeping an eye on communications, reminded Hayes that his hearing before the Oversight Committee was set for next week. They wished to know how decades of unapproved genetic testing were uncovered by a small-town sheriff. Be honest with them, Hayes said. Observing others support one another during their recuperation. The exposure came from human nature. We just decided to stand together. Maria reviewed patient data with a professional satisfaction in her voice. People are no longer only shielded from influence by immunity. Cellular structures are being taught to identify and reject artificial control. It would be similar to the humanities creating an evolutionary defense against anyone attempting to create conformity. The main entryway of the hospital had come to represent change. Locals volunteered to assist patients and their families in areas where Vale's contractors had previously maintained armed control. With their motorcycles shining in the dawn light, the Thunderlords MC had evolved from feared outlaws to welcome defenders. Richardson said federal resources are being reallocated. They are researching how communities spontaneously defend themselves rather than suppressing resistance. It's becoming the new norm to let people choose to stand together, like you did in Cedar Ridge. Barrett had become an unexpected leader in the town, even though his wound was still mending. Cedar Ridge was now guarded by the man who used to terrify it. Demonstrating Hayes's faith in the redeeming potential of human nature. Shaw went on to say that Joint Chiefs want your opinion on how to demolish the remaining infrastructure. Across the country, Project Thunder had facilities integrated into hospitals. The possibility of system shocks during removal worries them. Hayes suggested telling them to have faith in the local community. The genetic modification wasn't Vale's worst error. It was supposing that people had to be subdued. Tell them the facts and give them the freedom to decide how to defend themselves. They observed the hospital's ongoing change via security feeds. Employees who had unwittingly participated in Vale's scheme now set out to uncover and destroy it. The very structures designed to keep people under control had become instruments of freedom. Maria, however, called from the laboratory. These new immunity patterns are not limited to resistance to the chemicals used in Project Thunder. They are creating defenses against genetic manipulation in all its manifestations. Free will is being defended by human DNA itself. Harper, who was recently elevated for her part in revealing the plot, examined the hospital's refurbished facilities. We could have used the delivery systems they installed in a different way. Instead of choosing opposition, it may have compelled hasteation. Hayes answered, that's what Vale never understood. Force doesn't produce the most significant changes. They are the result of people making the decision to unite. To find out how a small Montana community had revealed Project Thunder's decades-long manipulation, the Oversight Committee had sent out preliminary queries. Hayes's answer was straightforward. It was impossible to design away human nature. Richardson updated, more facilities are being exposed. However, the federal probe is not the source of it. Local communities, medical personnel, and ordinary citizens are making the decision to reveal the truth. Naturally, the resistance is growing. Iron Fang MC patrols were supervised by Barrett, who had instituted a new code. No more violence, no more threats. They would turn into guardians, demonstrating that even the most resilient people could make the right decision. Maria noted that the youngsters exhibited the strongest immunity. The results of their blood tests are impressive. They are not merely being protected by the resistance factors. With every generation, they get stronger. Natural selection, favoring liberty over authority. They observed Cedar Ridge's recovery via hospital cameras. Not only from the attempted manipulation of Project Thunder, but also from the divide and fear it had intended to create. Humanity's innate propensity for hasteation is demonstrated. Aided by the fact that people who used to avoid one another now collaborate. Shaw reviewed federal correspondence and stated that Oversight wants to know what keeps another Project Thunder from happening. Why doesn't someone else attempt to make human nature more compliant? Hayes said, show them this, pointing to the security feeds. Communities deciding to stand together, strangers assisting strangers, and former adversaries hasteating. The defense lies in human nature itself. It opposes more forcefully the more you attempt to tame it. They hadn't merely won the battle for the genetic future of humanity. It had changed into something Vale had never saw coming. Through decision-making, not coercion or force. Via individuals choosing to stick together, defend one another, and maintain their basic humanity. Maria contacted Will, who was looking over the results of the final test. These patterns of adaptation are no longer solely about resistance. They are about making connections. About making the decision to be stronger as a team than as individuals. Hayes saw Cedar Ridge's ongoing development via webcams. It was the natural adaptation that came from freedom, not the artificial progress Vale had attempted to construct. From free will and the limitless potential of people to defeat attempts at dominance. The Oversight Committee would require protocols, procedures, and explanations. However, the reality was more straightforward than any law could depict. Project Thunder had failed because it went against something basic to human nature, the desire to maintain one's freedom, rather than because of tactical or technical mistakes. Sheriff Samuel Hayes stood in the courtroom parking lot a year after Vale was arrested, running his fingers over the Plymouth Fury's restored paint. He had saved pictures, but the gang symbols and obscene threats had long since been fixed. Reminiscent of how decades of unapproved genetic experiments had been revealed by a mere act of vandalism. Harper, who was now wearing lieutenant's bars on her uniform, remarked, "It's hard to believe it all started here." The big sheriff, who ended up becoming their greatest nightmare, was someone the Thunderlords MC thought they could intimidate. As Barrett's Reformed Motorcycle Club escorted patients to St. Mary's Hospital, Hayes grinned. The Thunderlords had discovered that being protectors, not criminals, was their actual purpose. The Community Guardian program was now printed on the patches on their leather vests. The Oversight Committee's final report was received. Shaw said, coming over with his tablet. Nationwide, Project Thunder's infrastructure has been totally demolished. Every major hospital is implementing Maria's immunity protocols as standard protection. There were indications of change all across the town. The area that used to house Vale's contractors' warehouse operations was now a community hub. People could now take tours of the maintenance tunnels that almost concealed the truth, teaching them the value of being on guard against deceit. During their weekly briefing, Maria informed that the latest genetic findings are impressive. Not only has the innate resistance that overcame Project Thunder endured, it has also been passed on through the generations. Natural defenses against genetic modification will be in place for future generations. Long since his injury had healed, Barrett had become an unexpected leader in the town. Hayes's conviction that human nature gravitated toward protection rather than destruction when given the chance was validated by the former outlaw's tight collaboration with local law enforcement. Richardson reported via Hayes's secret line that 17 additional facilities have embraced the Cedar Ridge Protocol. However, it goes beyond simply tearing down Project Thunder's infrastructure. Similar to your community, communities are deciding to unite. The facility was now a national model for genetic protection. Maria oversaw studies on enhancing people's innate resistance to manipulation, where Vale had previously attempted to engineer compliance. The exact structures designed to manipulate individuals had been repurposed as instruments to protect free choice. Harper thought, "I wonder sometimes what would have happened if they hadn't vandalized your car that morning," as she watched the Thunderlords carry an elderly patient. If they had selected a different town or target. Hayes acknowledged that it was accurate and said that someone else would have eventually revealed it. Human nature cannot be engineered away. It opposes more forcefully the more you attempt to tame it. They observed Cedar Ridge's ongoing development throughout the town. It was the natural adaptation that came from freedom, not the regulated progress Vale had imagined. Strangers aided strangers, former adversaries collaborated, and the community had become stronger by choice rather than coercion. Maria told visiting CDC officials that the immunity elements are no longer solely about resistance. In the same way that our genome is learning to defend free will, they are educating human DNA to detect and reject all types of artificial manipulation. The Thunderlords, led by Barrett, had extended their community initiative to nearby communities. They provided protection where they had previously caused dread. Other illegal gangs had reformed as a result of their example, demonstrating that even the most resolute individuals might make a better decision. Shaw noted that the federal regulations pertaining to secure communications had been entirely updated. They are concentrating on enhancing innate community ties rather than suppressing resistance. It's becoming routine procedure to let individuals choose to stand together, like you did in Cedar Ridge. What Hayes has known all along was recognized in the final report of the Oversight Committee. The fatal weakness in Project Thunder was not tactical or technical. It was essential. Something fundamental to human nature, the desire to be free, to defend others, and to unite against authority, had been attempted to be engineered away. Maria Caldwell from their weekly town hall. These most recent patterns of adaptation are displaying something remarkable. The resistance is no longer merely biological. It's getting ingrained in our identity and way of life. Hayes saw Cedar Ridge's sustained success through recently added community cameras, which are now utilized for protection rather than control. The town's greatest assets were the very attributes Vale had attempted to engineer away: compassion, solidarity, and the decision to stand as one. Do you remember the question Vale posed to me in his last interrogation? When Richardson visited each month, he shared. He was curious as to how decades of meticulously planned control could be overthrown by a small-town sheriff. I informed him that he had completely missed the point. Hayes affirmed that I wasn't the one observing Barrett's Thunderlords instruct local children in motorcycle safety. It was only human nature. It retaliated more forcefully the harder they tried to control it. The Plymouth Fury has established itself as a local icon. People would pause to snap photos, recalling how a straightforward act of vandalism had revealed a plot involving the highest echelons of the administration. Hayes, however, was aware that the car wasn't the true representation of their triumph. He pointed to a Thunderlords member helping an elderly patient across the street while kids played safely close by and said, "Look there, Harper." Vale never grasped that aspect of evolution. Control is not the source of the strongest adaptations. They are the result of decision. Maria's studies had gone beyond safeguarding against deception. She now researched how human connection itself acted as a safeguard against authority and how communities inherently supported one another. The hospital where Vale had attempted to build compliance had evolved into a hub for comprehending the extraordinary ability of human nature to adapt in a constructive way. Harper reflected 1 year as they saw their town flourish. A year has passed since we demonstrated to them the importance of not attempting to engineer away human nature or conducting experiments in tiny towns. As erstwhile adversaries banded together to strengthen their town, Hayes retorted, "And look what that year has taught us." Barrett had organized another community patrol. People typically decide to stand together when given the option. Now sitting restored in front of the sheriff's department, the vandalized Plymouth Fury that began it all served as a reminder that often the greatest threats to freedom are disguised as advancement, security, or authority. However, it also brought to mind something else that Project Thunder and Vale had never comprehended. Human nature cannot be engineered away. The only options available to you are to work with it or against it. And that decision had been obvious in Cedar Ridge. Remaining essentially human while standing together and defending one another. After a year, the fat sheriff's car had been vandalized and was no longer only a symbol of defiance. It had come to serve as a reminder that choice, not control, is the most powerful factor in human evolution. 2 more amazing tales await you directly on your screen in the next section. You won't want to miss these if you like this one. Simply click to view, and remember to subscribe. A lot would be at stake.
Disclaimer. This channel stands against all forms of intolerance, discrimination, racism, and violations of human rights. The stories shared here are original creations, developed to encourage reflection, understanding, and constructive dialogue. All content is produced with a commitment to respecting diversity and honoring human dignity.